Donald Trump signs executive order to block courts from seizing Venezuelan oil revenue. Protests erupt throughout the U.S. against ICE fatal shooting. And one death in early morning Yunnan fire. Good evening. Welcome to TVB News. Anger over immigration enforcement under the Trump administration swept across multiple U.S. cities after the shooting of a 37-year-old woman by a federal immigration agent in Minnesota last week.
Donald Trump can hear you!
A large crowd streamed into the Powderhorn Park in Minneapolis in frigid temperatures over the weekend to rail against U.S. immigration and customs enforcement officers in that city. The park is just half a mile from the residential neighborhood where Renee Good, a mother of three, was fatally shot on Wednesday. Her death, along with a separate shooting of two people in Portland, Oregon, have sparked national outrage over a pattern of unchecked violence by federal immigration enforcement agencies. The Trump administration, meanwhile, asserted that both shootings were acts of self-defense against drivers who weaponized their cars to attack officers.
I've talked to the number of people who are here at the protest today, and they say they came because they want to make clear that they do not want ICE in their neighborhoods. They say that they want to protect their immigrant neighbors. They want them to feel safe here, and so they're coming to make their voice heard.
Thousands of federal officers were deployed in Minnesota under a sweeping crackdown by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, tied to allegations of fraud involving Somali residents. Governor Tim Walz have called for peaceful protests amid escalating tensions, urging Minnesotans not to take the bait and present a reason for the Trump administration to declare martial law. It is reported that more than 1,000 protests, vigils and related events were planned across the country over the weekend. Demonstrators were converging in the streets of New York, Washington, D.C., Boston, Philadelphia and Chicago to grieve those killed and demand accountability from a system they believe has operated with impunity for far too long. Thousands of people showed up in Los Angeles on Saturday for an anti-ICE and no-wars rally, which was largely peaceful, but eventually ended in confrontations with police outside a detention center. In Durham, North Carolina, hundreds rallied at CCP Plaza, then marched through downtown areas to decry the killings. Some said they felt compelled to stand up.
I don't really have any connections to the Democrats or the left, but what Trump is doing is psychotic, because killing people in the streets in intimidation tactics is horrifying, and we can't allow it. We have to stand up.
Of course, the assumption is that this Justice Department is going to whitewash that case, absolve an officer of poor conduct at best.
A grassroots organization called the 50501 Movement has announced a nationwide letter-writing campaign urging the U.S. Congress to take action to abolish ICE and hold the administration accountable. Donald Trump signed an executive order to protect Venezuelan oil revenue held in the U.S. In declaring it a national emergency, Trump says the funds must be held to advance U.S. foreign policy objectives. David Garrett reports.
President Trump's latest move a week on from removing Venezuela's leader, an executive order safeguarding the Venezuelan oil revenue for the good of Americans and Venezuelans. The statement says the aim is to stop Venezuelan oil being used for judicial proceedings that it says could undermine critical U.S. efforts to ensure economic and political stability. Any attempt to seize money through courts could be an extraordinary threat to national security. It comes after Trump hosted U.S. oil bosses at the White House. He's encouraging them to do business in the South American state after declaring that tapping into Venezuela's vast oil reserves is key after his decision to remove Nicolas Maduro. Executives from 17 companies were cautious, saying the country is unstable and dangerous. Trump is offering security guarantees to get those energy giants drilling again. In Venezuela, hugs for a son and nephew who had been a political prisoner. Diogenes Angulo is now free. The teenager held for posting video of an opposition demonstration during the presidential election campaign 18 months ago. Oblivious to the fact that Maduro had been ousted by the US military, when told the former president is now the one in jail, Mr. Angulo replied, "Wow." His mother Nellie tears up as she says she could never have expected at the start of 2026 her son would be back with her and the country would be free. Venezuela has so far released about a dozen activists and journalists as a gesture of peace, more expected with US pressure on authorities. Dissidents in Argentina carried Venezuelan flags alongside candles as a mass to pray for those still held. Some of those released are foreign nationals and hundreds, maybe thousands, are still in jails in Venezuela. We are waiting, says Maria Alexandra Gomez. We haven't seen much of a response days on from the announcement of releases. We continue to demand more. Others who have left and set up shop elsewhere have mixed feelings about what they are seeing from afar. Up to 7 million Venezuelans are spread across the continent. Many fled poverty and oppression. This is just the first step, says store owner Yanalis Torres, a 22-year-old designer of T-shirts. Some poke fun at her leaders back home. Many of us have moved on from Venezuela, she says. We don't want to go back to zero. I made my life elsewhere. David Garrett, TVB News.
Financial Secretary Paul Chan will deliver the 2026-27 budget on February the 25th. He revealed that the capital amount for this year will still record a deficit. With that, the government will issue bonds to fund infrastructure investment. Samantha Lee tells us more.
A one-month public consultation exercise has been launched for the upcoming 2026-27 budget, which is scheduled to be unveiled on the 25th of next month. Writing on his weekly blog, the finance chief indicated that the city is able to achieve an operating account surplus earlier than expected, driven by strong financial market performance and increased stock trading stamp duty revenue. However, overall government expenditures are on the rise, resulting in a deficit in the capital account, under which public money is used to accelerate the development of the northern metropolis and other infrastructure projects. This, as Chan said, the government will leverage market forces by issuing bonds to support infrastructure. He said the returns on infrastructure investment will manifest gradually after completion. Currently, the outstanding debt of the government stands at about 12% of the local GDP, a level Chan described as very healthy by international standards. He also noted that the city's economy remains resilient while experiencing stable growth over the years following the COVID-19 pandemic. However, facing rising geopolitical tensions, unilateralism, and hegemonism, he warned of potential increase in market volatility. He said Hong Kong should cautiously guard against the potential impact of external market volatility on local markets and capital flows. Samantha Lee, TVB News.
A blaze broke out at a Yuanlong housing complex in the early hours of Sunday, leaving one woman injured and killing another man. Mimosing reports.
The video captures the moment when the fire broke out at Yoho Town in Yunnan. Firefighters arrived at the scene 3 minutes after the blaze was reported at around 6 a.m. They put out the fire about 20 minutes late. About 430 residents were evacuated in the process. This woman said she had heard loud bangs when the fire started and that some were screaming for their lives. But the man thought it was a fire drill at first. We were supposed to have a fire drill next week, but later I realized that it was an actual fire, he explained. Authorities found an unconscious couple in the affected unit. The 56-year-old man was pronounced dead at Park Oil Hospital, while his wife was injured. She has been transferred to Eastern Hospital for treatment. The Fire Services Department said it suspected that the fire had started in the living room and the couple were discovered in the bedroom. The department added that they are not ruling out the possibility of criminal elements. Memos 9, TVB News.
The Hospital Authority has approved more than 55,000 medical fee waiver applications. Chief Executive of the Hospital Authority, Libby Lee, says the HA has deployed more officers to review applicants' assets and income. There have been complaints from residents that they have to provide a lot of information for the medical fee waiver, including their betting accounts. Speaking on the radio program, Libby Lee noted some applicants placed some of their assets in their betting accounts, and the government has to meticulously review their assets as it is responsible for the use of public money. Secretary for Home and Youth Affairs Alice Mark said, Hop On Management Company Limited hopes to report to one for court's owners shortly after its takeover. Mimosa Ngai reports.
On Tuesday, the Lands Tribunal ruled that Hop On Management Company Limited under the Chinacam Group will handle the management of One Food Court. This comes after the government had applied to dissolve the management committee of the Owners Corporation of the housing estate in December. Speaking to TVB, Secretary for Home and Youth Affairs Alice Mack said the company needs to first register at the land registry before completing the handover procedures with One Food Court's Owners Corporation. Mack said the Owners Corporation is responsible for handling the relevant documents to the company so that the new management team can report to the owners after a period of review. She stressed that the reason for involving a company in the matter was due to the complexity of the management of the Taipo estate, adding that owners reserve the final right in major decisions. Mimosa Ngai, TVB News.
And still ahead. The top health official says more residents than ever took flu shots this season. At least 8 injured in one Tyson crash. And a colourful balloon parade at West Kowloon. Welcome back. The vaccination rate for this winter flu season has reached a record high. Speaking on the TVB News program, Director of Health Ronald Lam said it is still early to say if this could mitigate the flu activity at peak level. However, he believes the immunity of the vaccines should be able to last until the end of the winter flu season. Samantha Lee has more.
As the summer influenza season has concluded, Director of Health Ronald Lam told TVB News that it remains uncertain when the winter flu season will arrive, which typically occurs from January to March. Factors influencing this include frequency of overall social contact and the vaccination rate. He noted that vaccination rate for this summer flu season has reached a record high of 1.91 million doses. If the virus does not mutate, does that mean the impact of the winter flu peak will be reduced? If the vaccination coverage is high enough and the vaccine antigens match the circulating virus strains, the impact will be lower, Lam said. Currently, most of the data indicates that the predominant strain is the H3 subtype. Often, winter virus strains may include H3 and H1, and sometimes influenza B. The flu vaccines we are administering to the public cover these strains, Lam explained. As to whether a booster shot will be necessary for people who got vaccinated early in September, Lam assured that the immunity from the vaccine administered by the government can last for about 6 months. Samantha Lee, TVB News.
Ophthalmologists said acute angle closure glaucoma could cause blindness in a few hours. The medical experts reminded residents to seek medical help promptly if they develop symptoms related to glaucoma. The symptoms of acute angle closure glaucoma include eye pain, headache, and nausea. In a press conference on Sunday, an ophthalmologist said the prevalence rate of acute angle closure glaucoma could be higher during autumn and winter season because of flu medication.
Usually the anticholinergics within the medications, sometimes there's also a noradrenaline component, a noradrenaline-like component within these medications. These components of the medications have a side effect of slightly dilating the pupil. And when the pupil is in a more dilated state, that will reduce the ease of outflow of aqueous from inside the eye, outflow of fluid from inside the eye, and this can potentially trigger an episode of acute angle closure glaucoma, especially in those people who have a predisposition to angle closure.
At least 8 people were injured after a bus and a coach collided on Lung Chun Road. passengers, tourists from the mainland, got off the coach after the crash. They then boarded another coach. Police said they had received reports about the collision at around 11:30 a.m., saying a crash happened on the Guangdong-bound lanes of Lunchun Road. All injured passengers were sent to Queen Elizabeth Hospital for treatment. Authorities are investigating the cause of the accident. The US has launched another round of retaliatory strikes against the Islamic State in Syria, following last month's ambush that killed 3 Americans in the country. The large-scale strikes conducted by the US and partner forces hit multiple Islamic State targets across Syria. Back in December, the US also launched a large-scale strike that hit 70 targets across central Syria that had Islamic State infrastructure and weapons. On Friday, Syrian officials said their security forces had arrested the military leader of Islamic State's operations in the Levant. Since the ouster of former Syria President Bashar Assad, Washington has increasingly been coordinating with the central government in Damascus. A suspect has been charged with murder after 6 people were killed, including one aged only 7 in the U.S. state of Mississippi. 24-year-old Darika M. Moore faces first-degree murder charges after 4 of his relatives and 2 others died in a series of shootings.
Personally, I don't know what kind of motive you could have to kill a 7-year-old. It's just none out there that you can explain to me why this would happen. But again, as I say, and it shook me pretty hard too. But right now, like I said, my focus is the resolve of solving this case for our victims. This guy went on our radar. I mean, this is family members that he went after, and nobody has reported anything to us. So, you know, again, it can happen anywhere. And the best thing we can do is just stay on our toes and get out here and promote, you know, this anti-gun violence.
Rescuers detected signs of life in an avalanche of garbage that killed at least 4 workers and left more than 30 others missing in a central Philippine landfill. 12 workers have been rescued with injuries from the huge mound of trash that collapsed among the low-slung buildings of a waste management facility in the village near Cebu City. Rescuers are racing against time to find more survivors in dangerous conditions in the rubble of twisted tin roofs, iron bars, and combustible heaps of garbage. Officials say authorities confirmed the presence of detected signs of life in certain areas, and these need continued excavation and deployment of a more advanced crane. The 4 dead, including an engineer and an office worker, are all employees of the landfill and waste management company. Those who visited West Kowloon today saw an amazing parade of balloons. Let's take a look. And that's the news. Thank you for watching.